let's have a look at Pharmac, because on its surface level, you think $1.8 billion going into Pharmac is a good thing. There are a couple of contenders of concern around this. We'll get to it shortly, but let's have a look at the announcement made by I think he's a doctor, isn't he? Dr. Seymour, is that his name? Is he French? No, he's French Canadian. Dr. Seymour, about Pharmac today and the announcement for more funding for Pharmac.
We inherited a very challenging circumstance. To be perfectly frank, the previous government just wasn't honest with the books and left us with a fiscal cliff of monumental proportions.
That means the record boost likely won't actually fund any new medicines, just allow Pharmac to keep paying for the ones it already does.
This now gives us the certainty into out years that we can continue funding the medicines that we've already funded.
Effectively, Pharmac's increased budget was given time-limited funding. So as David Seymour is showing in this graph, it was going to fall away if the government...
So here's the question, and I don't know this yet, but it was funded to a point. Isn't it the same as every government funding? That it's funded to 2030, it's funded to 2026. It's funded to, or is it always there and always should be available and has Labor... kind of cook the books to make it look better than it was. I mean, obviously National knew about it because they say they're putting more money into Pharmac now, which is going to get us nothing new, but there's more going in.
So, yeah, I often think about this as well because they've talked about fiscal cliffs a lot leading up to the election and after the election. So it's their argument being that the previous government should have sky-high funding into another government's term? Did they not get a say in that?
I think what they're saying is they didn't fund it beyond the last term, but you're right. I guess they could have said this is going to be funded till 2030, but then what would have stopped National just coming in going, hey, all those other things we're appealing, we're changing that too. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not actually defending Labor here because I don't know, but this government has repealed so many Labor decisions financially, whether they had or hadn't funded this through to the year 2100, it feels like when something is funded, National's been going, we can't afford to fund this, we're stopping it. And when something isn't funded, they're going, can you believe they didn't fund it beyond this year? It's like they're kind of having their cake and eating it too, it feels somewhat, Joey.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll keep going with this, shall we? See what Dr. Seymour has got to say about this.
Government chose not to fill the gap.
But right now, we've inherited a fiscal cliff where we have to save the furniture.
We should start a drinking game with Fiscal Cliff.
I mean, this is real. Pharmac would have been basically choosing not which new things to fund, but which things that people are currently getting they should take away.
Politicians very rarely will have to make a decision that directly impacts upon a person's life. Depending on the level of funding they give Pharmac will determine whether or not some New Zealand patients will live or they will die.
There are currently 140 applications on Pharmac's options for investment list, the list of medicines it would fund if it had the budget to do so.
I would like to, but the reality is that we're not going to.
Sorry, can I finish that sentence? But the reality is we need $3 billion to go back to landlords. This is some of the Twitter conversation that's been going around today. See what a government can do when it takes care of its money. It can fund more to Pharmac. Yeah. And if they were also not giving back that $3 billion, what more could they do?
To be able to do that.
To fund those, Pharmac would need even more money in the May budget.
I'd like to see us get average with the rest of the developed world. That would require right now a $2.25 billion.
$2.25 billion. So that's $500 million more, Chewy. So what they're doing now is filling the gap, and with $500 million more, would be able to move forward. But this government can't afford that. Can you think of any reasons they can't afford that, Chewy? Is there one particular reason that the government can't find another $500 million?
It's actually probably a couple there, Pat.
Yeah.
Landlords have got their fucking tin cup out and they're rattling it round.
I forgot about that.
And the rich people don't want to share. So there's two.
There you go. So look, I mean, it does actually strike me more. There's three kinds of people in the world: people who think before they speak, as they speak, or after they speak. The ones who think after they speak are the most fun to be around. But I'm someone who typically thinks as he speaks, and as we're talking this out, I'm kind of going, yeah, actually, there's going to be a lot of new money that the current government's going to have to put in that the last government hasn't budgeted for in all sorts of areas of government. Because the last government isn't going to have planned all the way through the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So are we going to get this every 6 months or every 3 months? I'm talking about fiscal cliffs. They left us a fiscal cliff, which just actually means, we needed to fund it today. They funded it last week, last year. Is that all it really means? This has got about 15 seconds. We'll just play the end of it.
Increase.
We'll be pleased with any increase that we get. We have no problem spending it.
There will be more funding for health in general, as we've talked about in the budget, and you'll have to see that as we get to the budget at the end of May.
That's a solid wait till budget day to find out.
There you go. So that's where we're at. So it's I guess because I don't have the knowledge to understand it fully, being frank, it feels like a good thing giving money to Pharmac. But it feels like a bad thing going, well, if we had just $500 million more, we'd have an A-class system at Pharmac. And then the government goes, well, we can't afford another $500 million, whilst they're giving $3 billion back to landlords. And this other thing about a new government's going to have to fund when the old program runs out. There's going to have to be a point where they pick up the funding and make their own decisions. Is that just what this government's calling a fiscal cliff, Joey?
Yeah, they are. They're just setting themselves up for this to be used against them by the next government. But there was a couple of comments that are they're reasonably big ones. But Labor put up the Pharmac budget 9% each year it was in government. It funded Pharmac on a 3-year cycle, which would have been renewed in this 2024 budget for another 3 years.
So it's that payment cycle.
Yeah, there were no fiscal cliffs that the Labor government funded in 3-year cycles to give entities certainty in their funding going forward. The manifesto had funding commitments for everything. So this talk of fiscal cliffs is just bullshit to lump blame on the Labor government, because if you blame the last lot, you've got carte blanche. And look, both sides are guilty for this. And in a lot of cases, both sides are actually right about this. You can blame the previous government for doing something wrong, but it's just, are you accurate in that criticism, or is it just the drape that you put over everything and go, all of this is somebody else's fault?
And there's one other one as well. Bob Miller is a former political advisor in New Zealand and New York. He's interested in media, data, movies, and the conspiracy mindset. Bob's been on the show before. I'm going to put up what his take on the thing was. The one and only long-term aim for ACT being so involved in Pharmac and for National to help appoint a willing crony in Paula Bennett is to undo the fundamental system, it's terrifying, so that New Zealand's pharma landscape becomes as corrupt and ruined as America's. Everything else is obfuscation.
Yes, 100%.
Are we correctly terrified yet?
Yes. ACT standing around the foundations of some of our core socialized programs.
Yeah.
As a party that disagrees fundamentally with the idea of the government doing this sort of thing and wants the privatization of everything. Because they're not a libertarian party. They are a privatized fucking everything party.
Yeah, libertarians, as long as you've got the money to make choices. That's the kind of libertarians they like.
Absolutely. You know, if you've got money, you deserve to live and have a nice life. And if you're poor, get back to work. And I think that's when it comes through. When they're talking about libertarianism and freedom for all, get fucked. That's not what they're there for. They're there for the corporates. They're there for their mates to make money, buying government associated things at fire sale prices, which they can then strip for assets and make mad bank. Yeah, that's the end goal for that. And everything that Seymour says that is drawing fire away from that should be seen for what it is.
Kia ora again, whānau. The clip you've just watched is brought to you today by our patrons. If you want to be a part of what we do, if you want to get behind what we're doing, if you're enjoying our content and wanting to share our content, then maybe you would consider being a patron to Big Hairy News. Head to www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News to sign up to one of our levels and be a patron. At this point, we are only a listener and viewer supported show. It all comes down to you guys. If you feel like jumping on board to help, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Hooroo!